Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your time this morning, this afternoon, depending upon where you are, and your interest in joining BCD and this session that is targeting the security integrator community. We have intended to deliver this session within 30 minutes. So when that wraps, I'm going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&As that come in, and we will stick around for an extra 15 minutes to have a discussion or answer questions about anything that Darren has said today that you'd like some more information on. So please, we've got that 30-minute guarantee, but we have an extra 15 minutes built in so we can maximize the dialogue with you. And we'd like to start by thanking our powerful partners at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise for sponsoring today's event. I know we have several folks from Alcatel that are going to be joining us. And for those of you that have received gift cards, that is because Alcatel sponsored the lunch or the brunch that you all have been able to order today, so you can make this an actual virtual lunch and learn. We're very excited to have Darren Giacomini, BCD's Director of Advanced Systems Architecture, present today. Darren runs our engineering lab in Fresno, California, and he is also deeply embedded into the Alcatel community, sitting on ALE's Global Customer Advisory Board. I also like to refer to Darren as a unicorn, as he is quite a specialist in the network side of video surveillance and is a true asset to BCD and so many of us in helping support you and the projects you're working on to ensure from the edge to core, we have you covered. So I am going to turn this over to Darren Giacomini, but I encourage all of you as he is presenting, please throw some questions that come up into the chat, into the question box, and we will be sure to address those at the 30-minute mark when Darren wraps. So that said, I will mute myself, and Darren, this is all yours. Take it away.
All right, Marianne, thank you. So I want to thank you all first for joining us for the presentation with respects to the product overview for Alcatel-Lucent, and more importantly, talking about some of the key differentials and benefits that they bring to the table for the physical security environment. So if I look at what the agenda is for today, I always like to start off by talking about what are the common problems that our physical security integrators encounter, and some of the things that customers typically complain about, and where things can go wrong, and how those can be commonly related to network infrastructure issues, and what steps we've taken through development or co-development of some of our products with Alcatel-Lucent to try to ensure that we deliver a seamless deployment and integration of the network technology that the physical security environment resides on. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about, the last 18 years, some of the things that I've seen in the industry that are common problems I'm sure most of you will relate to, and how you can actually address a lot of those problems or map a lot of those problems directly back to some common infrastructure related issues or networking related issues. We're going to talk about web managed switches, when to use them, when not to use them, what the product portfolio is for web managed from Alcatel-Lucent's perspective. We're going to do an overview of layer 2 switching, talk a little bit about network segmentation, when you should segment your network down, why it's a good practice to create multiple VLANs or create segmentation points, and what things can go wrong when you don't. Then we'll talk about and move into the layer 3 switching architecture and overview. And it'll bleed a little bit between layer 3 and the high availability, which is one of the areas that Alcatel-Lucent absolutely shines. 802.1aq, or shortest path bridging, is a game changer with respects to physical security. For the last 6 to 7 years, I've been deploying networks with 802.1aq, or shortest path bridging, and there is absolutely nothing on the market that can deliver high availability video and the level of performance that you see with that particular technology. So we'll talk about that, what product lines support the shortest path bridging, or 802.1aq. Take a look at the core switching overview, or products that are available at the core, and discuss those briefly. Talk about some of the key benefits of OmniVista. And one of the really cool things that Alcatel-Lucent offers is, with purchasing of Alcatel-Lucent networking equipment, you do get the ability to have a certain number of of devices managed at no cost via an S&MP management suite known as OmniVista. So we'll talk about that and some of the rules and guidelines and things you have to know, obviously, when implementing that. And then we're going to end with the BCD Provisioning Assistant application. And the Provisioning Assistant application started, back in my days working for Avaya in a way to automate common failure points or common misconfigurations that are done in physical security networks. And we've evolved that as we moved Alcatel-Lucent into actually a graphical user interface on a smartphone app. And shortly will be released that same implementation on a Windows-based platform so that you can actually leverage a Windows-based platform for automated deployment or software-defined deployment for physical security. So that's the agenda. As I said, and as Maureen alluded to, feel free to pose any questions. If we can handle them during the presentation, great. If not, we'll take a look at them at the end. So looking at common challenges that people face in the physical security infrastructure, I can tell you this, from my days managing the network and professional services team with Pelco, that when we would see problems be reported in, they would often be reported as a camera problem or a VMS problem. More often than not, the focal point's on the video management system. That's typically the first call that comes in. And that can be a very skewed perspective because the same things always go wrong. In 18 years, customers have not stopped complaining about the same things, and integrators as well. If you have artifacting in the video, tiling, pixelization, tearing, degraded video, latent PTZ control is a common complaint that comes in. Loss of video, loss of archiving, slow responsiveness of live view or slow camera population time, system instability, and database corruption are the most common things. And those things have not changed, over the last 18 years. It's a very, very common thing. While I worked for Avaya, we actually hired a research firm to do some independent assessment as to when things go wrong in the physical security market, what really goes wrong and how much of that can be infrastructure related. And what we found is things that sit in the queue, meaning that when you call up your VMS vendor and you have a problem, and that problem does not drive resolution in about a 14-day time frame, over 85% of the time it's infrastructure related. If they cannot replicate that problem in their lab, it's almost always infrastructure related. And so this company, ZH Research, did some independent research for us, and they found out that when you look at these network related issues, a certain percentage of the time it's reported as a camera or VMS issue. And that was roughly, 16% of the time people would report that. That actually is kind of a skewed result because of the fact when something goes wrong, typically the first thing you call is the VMS vendor or the IP camera vendor. And a lot of times that's underlying network infrastructure that's actually driving those issues. But this is a quick, kind of breakdown in what people complain about. 33% of the time they complain about being able to pull up video footage in an adequate time frame. And if the network infrastructure isn't responsive or not built properly, you will see a latency in pulling up that video. And it doesn't sound like a really big issue until you dig a little bit deeper and realize that sometimes the amount of time it takes to pull that video up can affect the response time that law enforcement and personnel can do to assess a situation. 7% of the time, people talked about lapses in video footage, and that has a lot to do with convergence of the network and link failures and switches going down. 19% of the time, they complained about blurry video. When you have artifacting, pixelization, tearing, it is 100% of the time related to a resource restriction. Something in your network, your uplinks, your buffering, the ingress, egress queues associated with either the server and or the workstation, or the decoding itself has hit a point where it's in excess of 85% utilization when those things happen. The only other thing I've seen that's probably an anomaly to that is we had a lot of customers complain about blurry video, and really all they needed to do was clean the dome. If you look at network resiliency, 16% of the time, people complain about slow responsiveness or slow recovery from network resiliency issues. But these are the common things that people complain about. And almost all of these issues can be resolved by deploying your infrastructure in a solid, really, structured foundation, or removing the human element so that there is no possibility of misconfiguring that network. So we're going to dig into the layer 2 portfolio through Alcatel-Lucent. These are the layer 2 switches here. And as I said in the preview, we're going to move over to layer 2 and layer 3, and also talk about some of the high availability capabilities of shortest path bridging. Here's an overview slide of the OmniSwitch LAN products. And the product we lead with at the entry level is the OS6350, which is your SMB based switch. Typically meant for environments where you're going to have a single VLAN, probably 200-300 cameras maximum. And you're going to implement that in an environment where you're not going to do any advanced routing features or segmentation. If you take a look at the 6560 is actually the next product up that we actually carry. 6560 actually has the capability to do layer 3 routing segmentation, but is also the first product that actually implements the 10 gig based uplink today. Alcatel-Lucent is preparing to release the 6360, which will actually offer that 10 gig uplink in the entry level product as well. But today, if you want the 10 gig capabilities, it's the 6560s, and they also have the advanced capabilities or enterprise capabilities to create high availability at the edge and deliver video very effectively into the core. From the 6800 to 6900 series, anything above 6800 is where you start to go into what we call fabric-based or shortest path bridging-based implementation. And we're going to go through each one of these products individually, but this is the product that you start to go into where you absolutely cannot afford any downtime. If you cannot afford for the video to stop, or you cannot afford to have loss of the video during a link loss or during a core switch loss and resiliency, or you need ultra fast convergence, this would be the product line that you would actually target that. So from 6860 up through the 6900 series is the product portfolio that's meant for high availability implementation. Towards the bottom, you see that we've got a couple of snapshots of the smartphone application that's been developed. And then in the bottom corner, you see the actual OmniVista suite for management of those networks. So 2200 series. The 2200 series is a very cost-effective web-managed based switch product. That being said, traditionally, web-managed based products are not going to give you the versatility or the capabilities that you're going to get on a non-web managed based switch. So, we have these for implementations that are not going to use, multi-sensor 360 cameras or high megapixel cameras. If you're using advanced feature sets in some of today's cameras, or you need something that provides resilience or high availability or always on video, obviously this is not the choice that you would lead with. That being said, there are times where it makes sense to put this kind of web managed based switch out at the edge of the network, or it may be, a small convenience store or that type of deployment that just doesn't justify doing some of the advanced feature sets. So we do offer it, but traditionally we lead in with our entry level line at the 6350 series, soon to be 6360. That's what we typically target for our layer 2 deployments. This is where you would do a layer 2 flat network deployment, DHCP capabilities built into it, and we'll talk about how the app can actually leverage that. But we still see a lot of sites where integrators are statically IP addressing all of their cameras. And we built this DHCP scope capability into this deployment model so that we can put extended or infinite leasing into these addresses that alleviates the need to have to actually go in there and statically IP everything. And then as far as diagnostic capabilities are concerned, I'll show you in the application that there's a high volume of capabilities of things that I think are very intuitive and very innovative for physical security integrators that help them drive problem resolution or identify common problems that they encounter in these type of environments. Here you see the 6560 line. Today, this is where you start to get into the 10 gig uplinks. It's where you start to get into the multi-gig support for these. In some cases, if you're looking at a small core implementation, they do have a 10-port, 10 gig capable model that can be used either for small cores, or sometimes we see that switch is very effective at servicing like a SAN network or a backplane network for SAN storage between servers and SANs themselves. All of these in the 6560 have stacking capabilities, and all of them have the ability to support high availability from the edge into shortest path bridging based cores. And while it won't give you the kind of scalability you get in a true shortest path bridging model to the edge, it still does give you that sub-second high availability while reducing some of the port costs associated with that at the edge of the network. 6860, this is where you get into the point where you're going into shortest path bridging or 802.1AQ. I can tell you that with respects to shortest path bridging, I've personally tested this over 16,000 video feeds at 6 megabits per second. And I've dropped a core and into the VMS itself with about, I would say about 8,000 feeds going through it. All of the video converged from the primary core to the secondary core in about 750 milliseconds to the VMS platform. So what that means is that's always on video. Even if you were walk into a casino or a hospital and they had these cores and you were to unplug one, you would be 100% seamless. I did this in a test environment in a casino out in Minnesota, completely 100% active, walked to the primary core, unplugged it, walked back to the operations room, and absolutely nobody in the operations room with over 300 video feeds up had any idea I just killed one of the cores. That becomes critical when you start talking about code updates, when you start talking about imminent failures or failures that can occur. If you're trying to achieve the lowest latency or you're trying to achieve always on video, there is no technology on the planet that can deliver video the way this shortest path bridging technology does it. For these, you take a look at the 6860 P48 models and P24. These are your copper-based models with your 40 gig stacking capability and your 10 gig uplinks. And then you also have the 6860 U28, which is the 1 gig core aggregation. So on the 6860 line, if you're not bringing 10 gig links back to your core, 2 of these 6860 U28s can actually service as your redundant 1 gig uplink from your IDF closets. If you are going into a world where you're going to do 10 gig uplinks and want high availability, that is where the 6900 series comes in. And the 6900 series services as not only the core of the network, but also services as our primary go-to switch to actually be the switching infrastructure between our servers and our SAN storage that we're pushing out to the physical security market. 6900 also supports all the advanced routing features and shortest path bridging that the 6800 does. You still have your 40 gig uplink capacity, but they also introduce with the V72 and the C32 line, the capabilities to do 40 and 100 gig uplinks. So we're not seeing a lot of demand or drive for that today in an environment that's not, shall we say, a combined environment where it's running both IT and the physical security side. But I think that's coming down the market. And so we put ourselves in a place where we can start to offer physical security integrators the capability to access 140 gig capabilities that will operate in this lossless environment with ultra high performance. The 6460 is the non-SPV based compact hardened switches that sit out at the edge of the network. So they offer the capability to operate between 40C and plus 75C. You've got IPv4 routing, static routing capabilities, and IGP snooping at the edge, as well as we've deployed quite a few of these in parking garage environments using ring protocols for high availability as well. So they do offer a hardened-based solution in various port counts, and that would fall into the 6465 line. So this is just an extension of some of the extended temperature switches, not necessarily environmentally hardened, but they do offer a 6465 T series that is temperature hardened. So in these particular offerings, you're not going to put it in a harsh environment with dust and things like that, but you still can get a high temperature solution. 6865 is the 802.1AQ capable or SPB capable implementation of these hardened edge switches, including the 6865 U28X, which is the part of the offering in this hardened line of switches that can support high availability as well as supporting shortest path bridging at the edge. And as I said, the 6860 line is their higher end fast convergence, everything we talked about with SPB, but it's based on a hardened platform. All right. So let's talk about some of the benefits of Alcatel-Lucent in general. We have an outstanding relationship, obviously, with Alcatel-Lucent. We see a lot of benefit in the fact that we have a seamless engagement directly with their engineering team. So when calls come into BCDVideo, a lot of times we can, expedite and drive resolution while, in a competitive vendor environment, you're still stuck in tier 1 TAC. Another benefit is this OmniVista management suite. And this is provided for up to 10 switches at zero cost. So you can actually deploy this at your customer sites. And the only requirement is it runs in a virtual environment. It actually runs in Hyper-V. And you do need to allocate 16 gigs of memory to run this particular management tool. Once you have that, it gives you a very robust capability to manage not only virtual machines, but it gives you the capability of managing up to 10 networking devices, servers, etc., generating traffic reports, finding your top talkers, everything you would expect from a traditional management suite. All right. I want to kind of, as we draw towards the end of this, focus on something that I think that we've done that is a game changer. And we did this in a collaborative effort with Alcatel-Lucent in defining an automated deployment, meaning that, I've been to several integrators and I can sit down with their integrators. And one of the things that became evident is they have a restriction point, meaning they have one, maybe two network guys that have to engage in projects. If the network has to be deployed, it has to go through one or two people within a company. And that kind of creates a restriction point with respect to the number of projects you can take on. So in conjunction with Alcatel-Lucent, we developed this deployment app that can run within Android or any Windows-based platform that allows you to take a templated technology or a templated structure and automate the deployment or configuration of those switches that is 100% optimized for video, provides a level of security, provides high availability at both layer 2 and the SPB level or the higher end switch market, and gives all of that to entities that can be trained in a matter of 30 minutes, regardless of their network background. So this is kind of an overview of how we approached it. And it does say up to 100 cameras, but this can do well up to 300. You have a certain number of switches, and in the left here, you see just a star configuration, no resiliency. And the right, you see that you've built some resiliency out at the edge of the network for convergence upon failure. Either way, the way that you deploy this network is going to be the same. You're going to connect the Windows and or the Linux-based application in Android. You're going to connect into the switch and choose one of the templates. And as you choose the template, it will actually put an optimized configuration for video and allow you to implement not only an optimized solution, turn on DHCP, enable your PoE, natively give you high availability and multicast capability, set your system time, and enable LPS-based port security, meaning that you can lock the ports down so nobody else can plug into the network. And all of this requires little to no training, regardless of your background with respects to networking. So here's the example I'm going to use for the layer 2, the 6350 platform. That's what we targeted the layer 2 for. So you've got your 824 and your 48 port systems. And I'm going to take a look at an example here on this slide of how we can use snapshots or how we can use the Android-based app to do this. So in step 1, you actually take the provided cable and you connect it from the actual phone application directly into the switch. In step 2, you'll be prompted. It needs access to USB to enable it for this device, so you select OK. Once you select OK in 3, you can see at the top, you have a serial number, you have a MAC address, you will get the current software version loaded onto it. And all of that becomes really critical because a lot of times we'll spend time tracking down with end users or integrators, what switch is this? What's the model number? What's the serial number? And by plugging into the front of this with a phone app, all of this can be derived with absolutely zero complexity. The minute you make the connection, everything you would need to generate a support call is directly in front of you. Once that connection's made, you can see you have a series of templates that you can choose from in this particular model, including a core switch. The core switch automatically implements DHCP, or it gives you the option to support a non-DHCP based model if you want to statically select it. So in this example of a 10 switch network, as long as you selected a unique switch number for every switch going into the network, in a matter of minutes, you'd have an optimized video network. And no matter how you plug it in, whether it's redundant links or non-redundant links, it is going to be 100% operational, optimized, and delivering video at the best performance level that you can possibly get for that product. And 9 out of 10 times when things are wrong with the network, it's almost always related to some configuration issue. And by doing this from a structured templated approach, you remove the human element. You've removed the ability for somebody to push an error into the configuration. And that gives you an amount of power or leverage with respect to making a phone call to your VMS vendor. Because let's face it, if they can't replicate your problem, 9 out of 10 times, they will tell you it's your network. If you deploy all of your networks through this software automation, and there is no chance that you made configuration errors, and you know you're on a solid layer 1 infrastructure that's been tested, it gives you the ability to immediately push back on that vendor and say, no, there is zero chance I have a network configuration issue. I use a software-defined deployment that's structured. It's 100% automated. If I had this problem at this site, I would have it at 20 other sites. And it kind of refocuses that, that focus of that vendor to look a little bit deeper into what the problem is when they can't replicate it, rather than immediately pushing it out to, it's a network issue. So at this point, we selected core switch for our application. In step 5, you will then click apply. At that point, it begins to apply the configuration to it. In step 7, 1 to 3 minutes later, it'll come back. It said it's been completed. It'll take you to the home page where you can take a look, not only the log of the switch, but you can also look at the snapshot. And the snapshot is the configuration that's been pushed to that switch. Now, bear in mind, I've taken people when we demoed this at trade shows that have no networking background. They deployed a 4 to 5 switch network simply by being able to choose a unique profile for each one of the switches. And they didn't have to know what was going on behind the scenes. Just know when you plug your cameras and your archivers and your management systems in, that it's going to work the way it's intended to work. The next thing we did with Alcatel-Lucent is focus on a little bit of security. Now, is this going to give you 100% cyber secured environment? No, it's not intended to. But 90% of the things that go out today in these isolated standalone systems do no security whatsoever. By default, the application will implement port level security, where it will lock down the MAC address to the port. It will enable DHCP snooping and IP source filtering, and take the switch and move it to an SSH only model so that Telnet and other vulnerabilities aren't prevalent or available for people to get penetration or hacking points into the system. So here is a snapshot of some of the things that we built into it from the security side. When you connect to the switch, you'll be prompted after the initial configuration for username and password. At that point, you have the ability to specify a new password. Now, that being said, this is the one point where you've got to take a little bit of responsibility. You have to make sure you document that password, because once you push a different password out to this, you've got to make sure that you have that password available or you're not getting back into the system. And recovery of passwords on any switch is a very tedious, and I would say it's going to be an intrusive operation that's going to result in video loss. So we give you the ability to lock down SSH, do the passwords. More importantly, we built in diagnostics, and this is something nobody else has. In the Windows-based and in the Android-based application, you can actually take a look at your system health. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, you can say how long the switch has been up. You can look at your current 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day average for both CPU and memory, what your total system budget is, and utilize wattage for PoE. If you've had a crash file on the switch, and trigger refreshes or updates to continually look at this information. If your switch is above 85% utilization of the CPU, you're in the danger zone. And most people don't really know how to log in and get that, but this makes it very obtainable, or something that you can actually get directly from this application in a very simple fashion. We also built into the ability to do port health. There is a lot of ambiguity in the industry about, when I use a 1 gig port, what's the breaking point? When I use a 10 gig port, what's the breaking point? It's never going to be the actual line rate. It's almost always going to be the buffering associated with it. So we build the capability to actually select a port in port health. Take a look at what the link speed is. Does it match what it should be? Is it full duplex? Is it gig? Is it 10 gig? What the uptime of that port is, and more importantly, how many times the status has changed. If you see the status has changed 100 times, you have link flapping, or more than likely a layer 1 issue that needs to be addressed. You can take a look at the actual utilization of the port in a percentage, both inbound and outbound. How much am I using? And Alcatel-Lucent does an outstanding job of making this what I call human readable. 85% is the breaking point. If inbound or outbound traffic is above 85%, it is almost guaranteed you need to upgrade that link from what you're using currently. And you can get a quick snapshot of that and see exactly where you're at. More importantly, from a layer 2 or layer 1 physical capability or physical cabling, you can run a TDR report on that. And you can actually check the length of the cable and whether it passes the cabling standards. And all of that's available within this app to help you drive resolution to common issues that you see in these environments. That being said, I'll turn it over to Maureen, and any questions that you might have about what we looked at.
Thanks, Darren. So I do have a few questions coming in that we'd like to get some confirmation on. First of all, Kirk asks, does this require a special dongle for the phone to the switch?
So there is depending upon what you have, USB-C or micro USB is supplied with a kit that plugs into the switch that we provide at BCDVideo. So we actually have the cabling kits that will allow you to do this from your smartphones. But just like anything else, if you're looking at your laptop, you're going to have whatever the console cable that goes from serial console cable to the RJ45 port or micro USB. So the cable to make that connection will come in the box with the switch. The conversion point to go over to USB-C or micro USB for your actual smartphone is provided by BCDVideo and the cabling kits that we provide to our integrators.
Excellent. Thank you for addressing that. And the next question that came in was about support for iOS. So as you're talking about the Windows application, can you just touch on why we went that route regarding Android versus iOS and Windows?
Yeah, so it really comes down to, there's so many hoops you have to jump through with respects to Apple and getting an application that will literally connect at the serial port level over USB, that there were so many roadblocks put in the way that we needed to think out of the box. We realize a lot of people have iOS or have Apple-based devices, but we didn't see it ultimately as a viable way to create a sustainable product. So for those people that do not have an Android-based phone, you can use any Android-based tablet, or we give the option to use a Windows-based platform and load this deployment software onto a Windows-based platform, and you have all the feature set capability that you would have within the Android app built directly into your Windows environment.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Something else that we've been asked for clarity on is regarding the launch of the new 6360 series, the 10 gig series that you were talking about. Is that ready now, or are we still waiting on that? Because someone is saying it's ready to ship.
Yeah, so product availability is there. Validation has not been completed through BCDVideo yet. So one of the things that is very unique in what we do is we validate everything in-house, from architectures to switches to everything else. We put it through our paces through traffic generation. We put it onto an Ixia and beat it up and make sure that it meets the criteria that is intended for the physical security market. So yes, the product is released. However, it still has to go through official validation before it's released as an official BCD product.
Well, another important thing you're doing is allow and press now. Thank you for that. So those are the questions that I have right now that have come through Q&A and chat. There is a raise hand option at the bottom of the screen here. If anybody does want to jump in with some feedback, questions, or comments, please feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can ask that directly. Not to put anyone on the spot here, but certainly we're available for a few more minutes if you have any further thoughts for Darren. I don't see any hands go up, and I have addressed the questions that came through. So I think that means we're going to give you another 8 minutes and you take yourselves to finish the lunch we sent over. But we'd like to thank you all so much for joining us. BCD International is proud to partner with ALE. We are proud to work with so many of you who are on this call today, and we think it's very important to continue to provide ongoing education. So thank you, Darren, for taking the time to put this together. The next session that Darren will be speaking at live is going to be ISC West. So if any of you are there, myself, and I don't know if I actually introduced myself at the beginning. I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances with BCD International. And we put together a panel of some of our great partners, and we will be speaking on the Wednesday morning of ISC West on a panel called How Emerging Technologies Are Shaping the Future of Physical Security. So we're glad to have Darren in front of an audience there in person. If any of you are going to be at ISC West, we hope you can join us. And we will have this session, as you all heard at the beginning, it is recorded. We will have this session available later that you're welcome to review once we promote the recorded video. And please let us know what is of interest to you that you'd like to hear about in the future. As we plan our next sessions, we want to make sure that they're targeted at your needs and your desired emerging technology educational goals. So Darren, thank you very much. Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, thank you so much for your contributions today. We're really grateful for all of the integrators that were able to join us. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.